A few years ago, I said the first victim of high-tech warfare is high-tech warfare itself. What I meant is that modern weapons are so resource-intensive that in a prolonged conflict, they would simply run out. It is not the money that is the least of the problems. The real issue is the more a weapon is complex, the more it depends on other systems for logistic, maintenance, targeting, and so on, the more the logistic chain behind it is long. And long logistic chains are more vulnerable, and it takes time to go through the chain. Weapons with long logistic chains are either built in small numbers or absorb so many resources that they become detrimental for the rest of the defense architecture. When these high-tech weapons run out, the war would regress to a lower technology intensity. That was my point. Now, it turns out that I was wrong. Not exactly wrong, and actually, to be honest, I was quite right. Sorry, I know this is confusing. What I mean is that the same problem I saw has been now seen by several stakeholders within the US Armed Forces and US government. And it seems that finally, the US establishment is acting on this subject. Hi, I'm Gas, and this is Millennium 7. Modern warfare is expensive, really expensive. The US military spends hundreds of billions each year, and some weapon systems alone now cost more than the entire country's defense budget. Is this the only way? For a long time, the US military answered this question with a resounding yes. The language of the US Department of Defense, or Department of War according to the current administration, has always been full of words like advance, dominance, full spectrum, and so on. The standard answer to tactical, operational, or logistic issues has always been more technology. This approach has produced many excellent systems, but an exorbitant cost of time and money. The epitome of this situation is the F-35, an excellent aircraft that can make a huge difference in a large-scale conflict, but plagued with delays, low availability rates, and astounding costs. The latest estimates place the program cost at over $2 trillion, with a T, dollars during its lifetime. And don't worry, there is still plenty of time to go over budget again and again and again. Why is this happening? Well, plenty of reasons that would require a long explanation. In part, we have already covered this. But we can mention, for example, overly rigid requirements that lock programs into outdated specifications, low technology maturity at the start of development, but also bureaucratic delays and fragmented acquisition structures, and supply chains so long that they become fragile. Even programs designed for speed are facing delays and cost overruns, like those using the Middle Tier Acquisition Pathway, or MTA, which is based on rapid prototyping and rapid fielding. One example, the hypersonic attack cruise missile, which started when the technologies were not mature enough, and this caused delays across all the phases that perdure to this day. But things are changing. In late 2025, the Pentagon unveiled its new Arsenal of Freedom strategy. The idea was to flip the old acquisition priorities. Instead of cost, schedule, and performance, the new order is schedule first, performance second, and cost last. This doesn't mean cost is ignored, but it reflects a growing urgency to field systems faster, even if it means paying more upfront. To do this, the Pentagon is moving from program-specific teams to portfolio acquisition executives. It is giving leaders the flexibility to move money and trade requirements. It is also encouraging competition, and it is supporting smaller industrial actors to diversify the supply chain. As you can see, the focus is on the speed of delivery of systems that may not be at the apex of their category, even if they don't have the best cost-to-effectiveness ratio. The exact term is actually cost per effect, but I'm digressing. Now, to be honest, the problem was understood even before the change of tack was formalized by the US Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth. In fact, there are several initiatives already ongoing or recently announced aimed at creating something simple that could be subject to affordable high rates of production, which also tend to be cheaper. Not everything is in the public domain, but we know enough to identify some patterns. One textbook example is an ATV program whose official purpose is, and I quote, identify and prototype commercial and dual-use technology solutions for an enterprise test vehicle that demonstrate modularity for subsystem upgrade testing. I love this corporate speak. I was very good at it in my previous life. In practice, it means that a group of 4 smaller firms has been chosen to design a long-range cruise missile platform as simple as possible by using commercial off-the-shelf components and open architectures as much as possible. All of this for $150 a piece target price, which for the American standards is pocket money. Similar, but designed for another purpose, is the IRAM program. This is aimed at producing simple and cheap cruise missiles to be sold to Ukraine that could be easily built in at least 1,000 units a year. It is very secretive, we don't know much more. It should be either a powered JDAM or a powered JSOW. What is certain is that in the past, the US procurement would not have even tried to do anything like this. In fact, this is within the context of a new rapid contracting vehicle called AFLCMC/EBDK/AI. I am not joking, it exists, for real. The US military is watching at this program as a test to develop all the rapid capabilities we talked about. Another very recent development in the same direction is the low-cost anti-air missile. The official description is, and I quote, "The United States government has identified a need for the development, procurement, and integration of a low-cost counter-air capability as a future class of the affordable mass munitions portfolio. It is the government's expectation that the initial CAMP system will provide a ground launch capability that is a viable pathway to a low-cost air-to-air missile." Why they keep writing like this, I don't know, but anyway. In practice, the program is aimed at producing something with an AMRAAM-like performance, ground and air launched, that could be built at a rate between 1,000 and 3,500 units per year for no more than $500,000. For comparison, the AIM-9X costs $500,000, while the AIM-120 costs $1 million. The maximum achievable production rate for the AIM-9X is 2,500 per year, while for the AMRAAM is 1,200 units per year. And still we know nothing about the AIM-260, which should have started replacing the AMRAAM by now, and it is still missing in action. Anyway, please note that the consumption in an all-out conflict with China or Russia would be in the hundreds per week or even more. In few months, with the current stocks, the warehouses would be empty. I could go on for hours, but you got the point. There are all sorts of requests for proposals or entire programs being initiated in this framework of rapid deployment.
Please go on. I am sure the viewers are interested, sir.
Okay, just some titles relative to stuff that flies, so you can do your own research. The low-cost high-speed air-to-air missile, the Million Drone Initiative, the APKWS guided rocket, which is already in service as a low-cost drone interceptor, the Navy's multi-mission affordable capacity effector, the Army's Coyote missile. There are probably hundreds of these requirements or initiatives, many will surely be classified, and it is practically impossible to make a complete list. And I honestly start thinking that so many at the same time could stress the industrial base too much, but well, we will see. However, I think that now it is clear how the United States military is changing direction, partially backtracking from the high-end paradigm. This is a shift of historic proportions. This shift has been prompted by the lessons learned in Ukraine and by the new requirement of being capable of fighting a prolonged conflict in the Western Pacific. I'm sure that there are plenty of opponents within the US Armed Forces, but also among the traditional large US defense contractors. In fact, this approach is opening the door for other smaller actors, and it should improve the overall resilience of the United States military-industrial complex. There is a school of thought that says that the US military is not prepared to fight a modern war outside of its traditional operational concept. I believe that what I have just presented is a clear indication that the problem is known and the US military is working to fix it. All of this, though, makes me think that war is now perceived as inevitable among the higher echelons of politics and military leaders. And with this rather grim perspective, I will leave it here.
大家好，我是主播周玉琴。很多的朋友告诉我们，选择原版的太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌，它添加有羽衣甘蓝，健康再加分。而有睡眠困扰的朋友们，赶快选择蓝色包装这一款晚安加强版，绝对是更有感。每日克菲尔，时刻美好 ，Good Feel Good。请上快点购为健康下单，而且要记得输入推荐代码，有额外的折扣优惠。太阳星全效克菲尔益生菌基础版、晚安加强版，新包装改版，内容不变，抽取更方便。要吃就吃最好的。